They said she wasn't strong enough to survive on a Wyoming ranch. They were wrong. When bullets tore through the only home she'd ever earned, Mara Hale became the one thing nobody expected, the woman who held the line when hardened cowboys broke. This is her story of proving that strength isn't always carried in fists or guns, but sometimes in hands that refuse to stop when everything's falling apart. If you want to see how far a woman can go when the world tells her she doesn't belong, stay with me until the end. And hit that like button. Comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The wagon rattled to a stop in front of the Double Cross Ranch just after dawn, dust hanging in the cold October air like smoke. Mara Hale climbed down slow, favoring her left leg the way she always did, her cane hitting the dirt before her boot. The driver didn't offer help. Nobody ever did. She'd stopped expecting it 3 years ago. She straightened, adjusting the wool shawl around her shoulders, and looked at the main house. It was bigger than she'd imagined, 2 stories of weathered timber, a wide porch sagging on one side. Beyond it stretched corrals, a barn that looked like it had survived a war, and a bunkhouse with smoke curling from its chimney. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and brutal under the early light. A man stood on the porch, tall, mid-40s, face carved out of something harder than the wood beneath his boots. His eyes tracked her from the wagon to the ground, lingering on the cane, then moving up to her face. No expression, just watching. "You Mara Hale?" His voice carried across the yard without effort. "I am. Caleb Ross. I run this place." He came down the steps, boots heavy on the planks. Up close, she could see the scar running from his left temple to his jaw, white and old. "You know what you signed on for?" "Cook and housekeeper. Meals 3 times a day for 12 men. Laundry twice a week. General upkeep." "That's the job." He looked past her at the wagon driver, already turning his team around. "You got references?" 3 years at the boarding house in Cheyenne. Letters in my bag. "Cheyenne's 200 miles from here. You know that?" "I can read a map?" Something almost like amusement crossed his face, then disappeared. "Kitchen's through the back. Bunkhouse is over there. Men eat at 6, noon, and 6. You're late on a meal. They get mean. You can't handle mean. You won't last." "I've handled worse than mean." He studied her for a long moment, eyes catching on the slight hitch in her stance, the way she held the cane. "We'll see. Come on." She followed him across the yard, her leg aching already from the 2-day journey. The ground was uneven, full of ruts and stones. She'd learned to read terrain like other women read faces, what would hold her weight, what would turn an ankle, what required the cane, and what didn't. The kitchen sat at the back of the main house, accessible through a side door. Inside, it was bigger than she'd expected, but filthier than anything she'd seen outside a mining camp. Grease coated the stove, dishes were piled in a basin, water long since gone cold and scummy. The floor hadn't been swept in weeks, maybe months. "Last cook left a month ago," Caleb said. "We've been making do." "I can see that." "You need anything?" "Time. And whoever's been in charge of this mess to stay out of my way." He almost smiled. "That'd be me." "Then you especially." This time he did smile, brief and sharp. "Breakfast is in an hour. Men'll be coming in from the range. I'll manage." "See that you do?" He left, the door swinging shut behind him. Mara set her bag down and surveyed the wreckage. An hour wasn't enough time to clean, but it was enough to cook. She'd learned that lesson early. Nobody cared if the kitchen was clean as long as the food was hot. She got to work. By the time the first cowboys started filtering in, she had bacon frying, biscuits in the oven, and coffee strong enough to strip paint. They came in loud, boots scuffing, voices overlapping. Then they saw her. The noise cut off like someone had drawn a blade across a throat. 12 men stood in the doorway, staring. Some young, some old. All of them weathered in the particular way of men who spent their lives outside. And all of them looking at her like she was something that didn't belong. "Where's Caleb?" one of them finally asked. Older, gray in his beard, eyes hard. "Out." Mara didn't look up from the stove. "Sit down. Food's ready." "Who the hell are you?" "The cook." Silence again. Then someone laughed, short and ugly. "That's the new cook?" Jesus, Caleb really scraped the bottom this time. She plated the bacon, added biscuits, poured coffee. Didn't respond. Didn't need to. The food would speak for itself. They sat, reluctant, scraping chairs across the floor. She brought the plates over, moving carefully, the cane leaning against the counter within reach. Set them down without comment. The first man to take a bite stopped mid-chew, looked down at his plate, took another bite. "Damn," he said quietly. The others followed. Within minutes, the only sound was eating. When Caleb came in 10 minutes later, half the plates were already clean. He looked at the table, then at Mara, raised an eyebrow. "They give you trouble?" "Nothing I couldn't handle." He poured himself coffee, took a sip, and nodded once. "Good." That was the first meal. By the third day, the men stopped staring. By the end of the first week, they started nodding when they came in. Not friendly, just acknowledgement. But the ranch hands were one thing. The town was another. Mara made her first trip into Cedar Bluff on a Saturday, riding in the supply wagon with a ranch hand named Tomas. He was young, maybe 20, with a scar across his knuckles and a habit of not meeting her eyes. "Town folks can be particular," he said, as they rolled down the main street. "Just so you know." "Particular how?" "They got opinions about who should be where." She understood what he wasn't saying. The general store was at the end of the street, a squat building with a false front and windows that needed washing. Mara climbed down, ignoring the stairs from the boardwalk, and went inside. The woman behind the counter looked up, smiled automatically, then stopped. Her eyes went to the cane, then Mara's face, then back to the cane. "Can I help you?" "I need supplies for the double cross. Here's the list." Mara set the paper on the counter. The woman didn't touch it. "You work out there?" "I do." "As what?" "Cook." The woman's mouth thinned. She picked up the list, scanned it, then set it down. "I don't know if we can fill this." "Why not?" "Stock's low." Mara looked past her at the shelves, fully stocked. "Looks fine to me." "Well, it's not." They stared at each other. The door opened behind Mara, and two more women came in, their conversation dying the moment they saw her. "Who's this?" one of them asked. "New cook at the Double Cross," the shopkeeper said, voice flat. "Really?" The woman looked Mara up and down. "Caleb Ross hired you?" "He did." "Huh." She exchanged a glance with her companion. "Didn't think he was that desperate." Mara felt the heat rising in her chest but kept her voice level. "Are you going to fill this order or not?" The shopkeeper sighed, heavy and theatrical. "I suppose I can try, but it'll take time." "How much time?" "Few hours." "Fine. I'll wait." She didn't wait inside. She went back to the wagon, sat on the edge, and watched the town move around her. People glanced her way, then looked away fast. A few whispered. One woman crossed the street to avoid walking past her. Thomas came back an hour later, face tight. "You okay?" "I'm fine. They're talking." "Let them." He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "Boss ain't gonna like it if the town decides to make trouble." "Then he can take it up with the town." Tomas didn't argue, but he stayed close until the supplies were loaded. The shopkeeper didn't say goodbye. On the ride back, Mara stared at the horizon and thought about the boarding house in Cheyenne. It hadn't been easy there either, but at least people were used to her. Here, she was starting over. Again. "They'll get used to you," Tomas said quietly. "Maybe." "Boss wouldn't have hired you if he didn't think you could handle it." She looked at him. "You think he hired me because I can handle it, or because nobody else wanted the job?" Tomas didn't answer. Back at the ranch, Caleb was waiting by the barn. He took one look at her face and frowned. "What happened?" "Nothing." "Don't lie to me." She met his eyes. "The town doesn't like me. That's not nothing, but it's not something you can fix either." He studied her, jaw working. "They give you trouble at the store?" "They were rude. I've had worse." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." For a moment she thought he'd push. Then he nodded, sharp and final. "You let me know if it gets worse." "Why? You planning to hold their hands until they like me?" "No. I'm planning to make sure they don't run you off before you've had a chance." She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing, just nodded and headed for the kitchen. That night she made stew. Rich, thick, full of meat and potatoes and carrots she'd managed to pry out of the shopkeeper's clutches. The men ate in silence, the way they always did. But when they were done, one of them, an older cowboy named Dutch, cleared his throat. That was good. Mara looked up from the dishes. Thanks. Better than good, actually. He stood, hat in his hands. Appreciate it. The others murmured agreement, a low rumble of voices. It wasn't much, but it was something. After they left, Caleb lingered, cup of coffee in his hands. You settling in? As much as I can. Men respect you. That's not easy to earn. I'm not here to be respected. I'm here to cook. Yeah, well, you're doing both. He paused. Town will come around. You don't believe that any more than I do. He smiled, faint and tired. No, but I thought it might help to hear it. She almost smiled back. Almost. The weeks blurred together. Wake before dawn, start the fire, make coffee, cook breakfast, clean, prep lunch. Cook lunch. Clean. Prep dinner. Cook dinner. Clean. Sleep. Repeat. Her leg ached constantly, a deep throb that never quite went away. Some mornings she could barely put weight on it. Those days she leaned on the counter, the table, anything solid. The men noticed but didn't comment. Neither did Caleb. The town, though. The town noticed everything. Every trip into Cedar Bluff was the same. Stares. Whispers. The shopkeepers barely concealed disdain. Once, a woman spat on the boardwalk as Mara walked past. Tomas saw it, started to say something, but Mara shook her head. Not worth it. It's not right. Lots of things aren't right. Doesn't mean we can fix them. But the town wasn't content to just whisper. 3 weeks after Mara arrived, the shopkeeper refused to sell her flour. Out of stock, she said, arms crossed. You sold some to the Cartwright Ranch yesterday. That was yesterday? There's flour right behind you. That's reserved. Mara felt the anger building, hot and sharp, but kept her voice even. Reserved for who? Customers I trust. I'm a customer. You work for Caleb Ross. That's different. How? The shopkeeper leaned forward, voice dropping. You want the truth? People don't like what you represent. A woman like you, working out there with all those men. It's not decent. I'm a cook. You're a cripple living on a ranch full of cowboys. That's what you are. The room went silent. Even the other customers stopped pretending not to listen. Mara gripped her cane, knuckles white. I need flour. Then go somewhere else. There is nowhere else. Not my problem. Tomas stepped forward, but Mara put a hand on his arm. Let's go. But let's go. They left. On the ride back, Mara stared at her hands and tried to breathe through the humiliation. Boss is going to lose his mind, Tomas said. Don't tell him. He needs to know. What's he going to do? Ride into town and demand they sell me flour? That'll just make it worse. Tomas didn't argue, but when they got back, he went straight to Caleb anyway. Caleb found her in the kitchen, kneading dough made from the last of the flour. Heard what happened. It's fine. It's not fine. I'll figure it out. How? She didn't have an answer. He pulled out a chair, sat down heavy. I'll go into town, talk to them. And say what? Be nice to the cripple? Don't call yourself that. Why not? That's what they see. That's not what I see. She stopped kneading, hands still in the dough. What do you see? He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. Someone who doesn't quit. She didn't know what to say to that, so she went back to kneading, and he sat there watching until the dough was ready. That night, he rode into town. Mara didn't ask what he said, but 2 days later, when she went back to the store, the shopkeeper sold her flour without a word. It should have felt like a victory. It didn't. The ranch itself, though, that was different. The men had gone from ignoring her to relying on her. They started asking for specific meals, started saying thank you, started treating the kitchen like it mattered. Dutch, the older cowboy, began staying after meals to help with dishes. He didn't talk much, just worked alongside her, drying while she washed. You got family? He asked one night. Not anymore? What happened? They died. Fever took them when I was 16. That when you hurt your leg? No, that was later, wagon accident. He nodded, didn't pry. You ever think about leaving? Going somewhere easier? Every day. But you don't. No. Why not? She thought about it. Because easy doesn't prove anything. He smiled, slow and understanding. No, I suppose it doesn't. November came, and with it the first snow. The ranch slowed down, the men spending more time in the bunkhouse, less time on the range. Mara's workload didn't change, but the rhythm did. Slower, quieter. Caleb started eating breakfast in the kitchen instead of with the men. At first she thought it was about the food. Then she realized he was just tired of eating alone. You ever think about leaving? She asked him one morning, echoing Dutch's question. Every winter. But you don't. No. Why not? He looked out the window at the snow-covered mountains. Because this is mine. Bought it with money I earned. Built it into something that works. I leave, it falls apart. You could sell it. To who? Nobody wants a ranch this remote. He turned back to her. Besides, where would I go? Somewhere warm? He smiled. You cold? Always. Then why'd you come to Wyoming? Because it's the only place that would have me. The smile faded. That's not true. It is. You think anyone in Cheyenne would have hired me to do more than wash dishes? You think any ranch closer to civilization would have taken a cook who can barely walk? I didn't hire you because I was desperate. Then why? He held her gaze. Because your letter didn't apologize. Every other one did. I know I'm not ideal, but I understand if this is a problem, but yours just said what you could do and what you wanted in return. No excuses. She hadn't expected that. So you hired me out of spite? No, I hired you because spite's underrated. She laughed, surprised at the sound. He grinned. There. Knew you could smile. Don't get used to it. But after that, something shifted. The kitchen felt less like a workspace and more like something else. Caleb started lingering after breakfast, talking about the ranch, the men, the winter. She told him about Cheyenne, about the boarding house, about the women who'd whispered behind her back. They were scared, he said. Of what? Of being you. People see someone struggling and think that could be me. Makes them mean. You ever been scared like that? Once, long time ago. What changed? He touched the scar on his face, unconscious. I stopped caring what people thought. That easy? No, but necessary. She understood that. December brought a cold snap that froze the water in the troughs and made every step outside an ordeal. Mara's leg hurt so badly some mornings she could barely stand, but she pushed through it. The men needed to eat. That was the job. Then, 2 days before Christmas, everything went to hell. One of the younger cowboys, a kid named Sam, barely 18, came in from the range screaming. Blood soaked his shirt, his face white as the snow outside. Help! Someone help! Mara dropped the pot she was holding and moved as fast as she could. What happened? It's Billy! Horse threw him! He's hurt bad! Dutch and 2 others were already running for the door. Caleb appeared from the barn, face grim. Where? North pasture. They were gone in seconds, horses pounding across the frozen ground. Mara stood in the doorway, heart hammering, useless. 30 minutes later, they came back. Billy was draped across Caleb's horse, unconscious, his left leg bent at an angle that made Mara's stomach turn. Get him inside, Caleb shouted. They carried him into the main house, laid him on the table. Blood everywhere. The leg was broken, bone visible through torn skin. Billy's breathing was shallow, ragged. Someone needs to ride for the doctor, Dutch said. Doctor's in Larson. That's 4 hours there and back in good weather. Caleb looked at the window, where snow was starting to fall. He won't make it. Then what do we do? Everyone looked at Mara. She stared at Billy, at the blood, at the bone. Her hand started shaking. I'm not a doctor. You're the closest thing we've got, Caleb said. His voice was steady, but his eyes were desperate. You've done this before. I know you have. She had. Once, at the boarding house, when a man had fallen down the stairs and broken his arm. She'd said it because there was no one else, and somehow it had worked. But this was worse. So much worse. I don't know if I can. You have to. She looked at Billy's face, pale and slack, then at the men watching her, waiting. Get me water, clean cloth, whiskey, and something to bite down on. They moved. Mara took a breath, then another. Her hands were still shaking, but she forced them steady. This was just another problem, another thing that needed fixing. She could do this. She had to. The whiskey burned going down Billy's throat. What little made it past his clenched teeth. Most of it ran down his chin, mixing with the sweat already soaking his collar. His eyes rolled back, white showing, and his whole body went rigid. "Hold him," Mara said. Dutch and Caleb pinned Billy's shoulders. Tomas grabbed his good leg. Sam stood in the corner, face green, looking like he might pass out. Mara positioned her hands on either side of the break, feeling the heat of torn flesh, the wrongness of bone where it shouldn't be. Her leg throbbed in sympathy, remembering. She pushed the memory down. "On three," she said. "One, she pulled. Billy's scream tore through the house, raw and animal. His back arched off the table. The men held him down, muscles straining. Mara felt the bone shift, grind. Then, there. The alignment wasn't perfect, but it was close enough. "Splint," she said. Dutch handed her 2 pieces of wood they'd pulled from a broken crate. She positioned them on either side of Billy's leg, then wrapped them tight with strips of cloth torn from an old sheet. Her hands moved fast, efficient, not letting herself think about what she was doing or what would happen if she'd done it wrong. Billy had gone quiet, either unconscious or too exhausted to scream anymore. His breathing came in shallow gasps. "He needs to stay still," Mara said, stepping back. Her hands were shaking again now that it was done. "Someone has to watch him. If he moves, the bone could shift." "I'll do it," Dutch said. Caleb was staring at her, something fierce in his expression. "You just saved his life." "Maybe. Or maybe he'll die of infection tomorrow." She looked down at her blood-covered hands, bile rising in her throat. "I need to wash up." She made it to the kitchen before her legs gave out, sat hard on the floor, back against the cabinet, and tried to breathe. The shaking had spread from her hands to her whole body now, adrenaline draining away and leaving nothing but exhaustion. Caleb found her there 5 minutes later. "You okay?" "No." He sat down beside her, his shoulder touching hers. "You did good." "I don't know what I did." "You did what needed doing. That's all that matters." She turned to look at him. Up close she could see the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his hair at the temples. He looked older than he had that first morning, tired. "Why'd you say you knew I'd done this before?" "Your letter mentioned working at a boarding house. Boarding houses see everything, fights, accidents, sickness. Figured you'd learned more than just cooking. You figured a lot from one letter." "I'm good at reading what people don't say." She wanted to ask what else he'd read, but footsteps on the stairs stopped her. Sam appeared in the doorway, still pale but steadier. "Billy's awake, he's asking for water." Mara pushed herself up, using the cabinet for support. Caleb stood too, offered his hand. She took it. In the main room, Billy lay on the table, eyes open and glazed with pain. Dutch sat beside him, a damp cloth in his hand. "Hey," Billy croaked when he saw Mara. You fixed me?" "I tried." "Hurts like hell. That means the bone's still alive. That's good." He tried to smile, failed. "Thanks." "Don't thank me yet. We won't know if it worked for weeks." But he'd already closed his eyes again, drifting. They moved Billy to Caleb's room, the only one on the first floor. Caleb took a bedroll in the bunkhouse over Dutch's protests. The men took turns sitting with Billy through the night, changing his bandages, giving him water, keeping him still. Mara didn't sleep. She lay in the small room off the kitchen that Caleb had cleared out for her weeks ago and stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment. The angle of the bone, the sound it made shifting, the scream. Morning came gray and cold. She dragged herself up, started the coffee, got bacon frying. Her hands felt disconnected from her body, clumsy. The men filtered in quieter than usual. They ate without talking, glancing toward the closed door of Caleb's room. "He made it through the night," Dutch said. "That's something." "Fever?" Mara asked. "Not yet. It'll come. Always does." She was right. By afternoon, Billy was burning up, delirious, thrashing against the restraints they'd tied to keep him from moving the leg. Mara made poultices from what herbs she had. Not much, not enough, but something. She changed his bandages every few hours, checking for the red streaks that would mean infection had taken hold. They appeared on the second day. "We need a doctor," Sam said, voice cracking. "Doctor won't come in this weather," Dutch said. The snow had been falling steadily since Billy's accident, 3 feet deep now, and still coming. Mara stared at the red lines creeping up Billy's calf, her stomach hollow. "I don't know what else to do." "You've done more than anyone could ask," Caleb said. He'd barely left Billy's side except to eat and check the stock. His eyes were bloodshot, face haggard. "It's not enough. It's all we have." That night, Billy's fever spiked so high he stopped making sense. He called for his mother, for someone named Sarah, begged them not to leave him. Mara sat beside him, cloth in hand, trying to cool the fire burning through his skin. "You did this before," Caleb said from the doorway. "At the boarding house, what happened?" "He lived, but he was older, stronger, and the break wasn't this bad." "But he lived." "Yes." "Then Billy can too." She wanted to believe him, but she'd seen too many people die from less to let herself hope. By the third day, the red streaks had reached Billy's knee. He barely woke up anymore, just drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling. The men started talking in low voices, words like burial and when, not if. Mara stopped eating, stopped sleeping, just sat by Billy's bed and changed bandages and prayed to no one in particular that she hadn't killed him. On the 4th day, the fever broke. Billy opened his eyes just after dawn, clear for the first time in days. "I'm thirsty." Mara nearly dropped the cloth she was holding. "What?" "Water, please." She got him water, hands shaking so badly she spilled half of it. He drank, slow and careful, then laid back. "How long was I out?" 4 days. "Feels longer." He looked down at his leg. "It's still there?" "Yes." "It gonna stay there?" "I think so." He closed his eyes. "Good." Word spread through the ranch like wildfire. The men started smiling again, talking louder. Dutch clapped Mara on the shoulder so hard she nearly fell over. "You did it," he said. "He did it. I just helped. You saved his life. Don't downplay it." But she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd gotten lucky, that next time, if there was a next time, she might not be. Caleb found her in the kitchen that afternoon, staring at nothing. "You need to rest." "I'm fine." "You're not. You've been awake for 4 days. So have you." "I'm used to it." He pulled out a chair, sat down across from her. "Billy's asking for you." "What for?" "To say thank you." "He already did." "Well, he wants to do it again." Caleb leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You know what this means, right? What you did?" "I set a bone." "You proved you belong here." She looked at him. "To who?" "To the men. To yourself." He paused. "To me." Something twisted in her chest, uncomfortable and warm at the same time. "I never asked to prove anything to you." "I know. That's why it matters." Before she could respond, the door banged open. Tomas stood there, snow on his shoulders, face tight. "Boss, we got a problem." Caleb was on his feet instantly. "What kind?" "Town kind." They rode into Cedar Bluff 2 hours later, Caleb, Dutch, and Tomas. Mara wanted to go, but Caleb refused. "You need to stay with Billy. He's fine. And he'll stay that way because you're watching him. I need you here." She hated it, but he was right. So she stayed and waited and tried not to imagine what kind of problem required 3 armed men to handle. They came back after dark, faces grim. "What happened?" Mara asked. Caleb dismounted, handed his reins to Sam. "Shopkeepers decided she won't sell to the Double Cross anymore. Not just you, all of us." "Why?" "Because you work here. She's saying it's indecent, a woman living with a bunch of men. Some of the other merchants are backing her up." Mara felt the floor drop out from under her. "So it's my fault." "It's not your fault. It's theirs for being small-minded and mean. Doesn't matter whose fault it is. If they won't sell to you, you can't run the ranch. We'll figure something out." "Like what?" He didn't have an answer. That night, Mara lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. The math was simple. Without supplies from Cedar Bluff, the ranch would have to send someone all the way to Larson. 2 days there and back in good weather, longer in winter. That meant higher costs, more time, less efficiency. And all because she was here. She should leave. It was the obvious solution. The ranch would survive without her. Caleb could hire another cook, someone the town wouldn't object to. But the thought of leaving made her chest ache in a way she didn't want to examine. The next morning, she told Caleb she was going into town. Like hell you are. I need to talk to them. And say what? Apologize for existing? If that's what it takes? No. His voice was flat, final. You're not doing that. It's not your decision. It is when you're riding in my wagon. They stared at each other, the air crackling with tension. You can't fix this by being reasonable, Caleb said, voice softer now. They don't want reason. They want you gone. Then maybe I should go. Is that what you want? No, but it doesn't matter what I want. Why not? Because I'm one person, and they're a whole town. Because I'm not worth destroying everything you've built here. He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You're worth more than you think. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, just stood there, heart pounding, while he looked at her like she was something precious. Then Dutch cleared his throat from the doorway, and the moment shattered. Boss, Billy's awake and asking for breakfast. Caleb stepped back, the intensity fading from his expression. Tell him Mara will bring something up. Dutch nodded and disappeared. Mara turned back to the stove, hands shaking. I should cook. Yeah. Caleb's voice was rough. You should. He left. She cooked, and tried very hard not to think about what had almost happened. Over the next week, the situation in town got worse. The blacksmith refused to shoe their horses. The feed store wouldn't sell them hay. Even the saloon, the one place that usually didn't care who your money came from, turned Caleb away. The men started grumbling, not at Mara, but at the situation. They needed supplies, needed equipment, needed things Cedar Bluff had, and Larson didn't. We could just take it, one of the younger cowboys said at dinner. Ride in, load up, leave. That's stealing, Dutch said. So's refusing to sell to paying customers. It's not the same and you know it. The argument escalated, voices rising. Mara stayed at the stove, pretending not to hear, but she felt the weight of their frustration. This was her fault, all of it. That night, she made a decision. She waited until everyone was asleep, then dressed in her warmest clothes and took the money she'd saved from her wages. It wasn't much, but it was something. She wrote a note to Caleb, short, direct, no apologies, and left it on the kitchen table. Then she walked out into the snow. The nearest town was Larson, 20 miles east. In good weather, on a horse, it was a day's ride. On foot, in winter, with a bad leg, it would take 3 days. Maybe more. She made it 5 miles before her leg gave out. The pain hit like a hammer, sudden and complete, dropping her to her knees in the snow. She tried to stand, couldn't, tried again, fell again. The cold was already seeping through her coat, numbing her fingers. This was stupid. She'd known it was stupid before she started, but she'd done it anyway because staying felt impossible and she didn't know what else to do. She was going to die out here, alone, frozen, stupid, hoofbeats. She looked up, squinting through the snow. A rider, coming fast. As he got closer, she recognized the horse. Caleb. He dismounted before the horse had fully stopped, dropping to his knees beside her. What the hell were you thinking? I was thinking... She stopped because she couldn't feel her face anymore and the words weren't coming out right. He swore, vicious and creative, and scooped her up. She tried to protest, but he ignored her, lifting her onto the horse before climbing up behind her. His arms came around her, holding her against his chest, and she could feel the fury radiating off him. They rode back in silence. When they reached the ranch, he carried her inside, set her down in front of the fire Dutch had already built up, and started pulling off her wet boots. Don't, she said. Shut up. Caleb. I said shut up. He got the boots off, then her socks, checking her feet for frostbite. His hands were shaking. 5 more minutes and you'd be dead, you understand that? Dead. I was trying to help. By killing yourself? That's your idea of help? The town won't stop until I'm gone. I thought if I left, you thought wrong. He looked up at her, eyes blazing. You think I care what the town wants? You think I give a damn what they say about you or me or this ranch? You should. They can ruin you. Let them try. He stood, pacing. I've been ruined before. I survived. What I can't survive is you dying in the snow because you thought you weren't worth fighting for." Her throat closed up. "I'm not." "Yes, you are." He crossed back to her, crouched down so they were eye level. "You saved Billy's life. You've kept every man on this ranch fed and healthy through the worst winter in 5 years. You've done more in 3 months than most people do in a lifetime. So don't you dare tell me you're not worth fighting for." She wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. So she just sat there, shaking, while he wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and brought her coffee, and waited for her to stop being stupid. Morning came too soon. Mara woke up in her bed. Caleb must have carried her there after she fell asleep, feeling like she'd been trampled by horses. Her leg was swollen, her feet still numb, and every muscle in her body screamed. She forced herself up anyway. In the kitchen, Caleb was making coffee. He looked like he hadn't slept, dark circles under his eyes, jaw tight. "You shouldn't be up," he said. "Neither should you." "Someone has to make breakfast. That's my job." "Not today, it's not." He poured her coffee, set it in front of her. "Sit. Rest. Let someone else carry the weight for once." She wanted to argue, but she was too tired. So she sat and drank and watched him work. He wasn't as fast as her or as skilled, but he was competent. The men would eat. "Where'd you learn to cook?" she asked. "Army. Someone had to feed the troops, and I drew the short straw enough times to pick it up." "You were in the army?" "Long time ago." He cracked eggs into a pan, movements efficient. "Before I bought this place." "Is that where you got the scar?" His hand went to his face, unconscious. "Yeah." "What happened?" "Saber. Cavalry charge went bad." He flipped the eggs. "I lived. Most of my unit didn't." She heard what he wasn't saying. "That's why you came out here. To get away. To build something that couldn't be taken away by some officer's bad call." He plated the eggs, started on bacon. "Didn't count on the town being worse than the army." "I'm sorry." "For what?" "Making it harder." He looked at her, something soft in his expression. "You haven't made anything harder. You've made it better." Before she could respond, the men started filing in. They saw Mara sitting instead of cooking and stopped. "You okay?" Dutch asked. "She's fine," Caleb said. "Sit down and eat." They sat, but they kept glancing at her, worried. Word must have spread about her midnight walk. The younger cowboys looked scared. The older ones looked angry. "We need to do something about the town," one of them said. "We're not doing anything," Caleb said. "They can't just cut us off." "I said we're not doing anything." His voice had gone hard, the tone that meant the discussion was over. "We'll ride to Larson for supplies. It'll cost more and take longer, but we'll manage." "That's not sustainable." "It'll have to be." The men didn't like it, but they didn't argue. After breakfast, they filed out, leaving Mara and Caleb alone. "You can't keep doing this," she said. "Doing what?" "Protecting me. It's costing you too much." "That's my decision to make." "Caleb, no." He sat down across from her, tired and stubborn. "I'm not having this argument again. You're staying. The ranch will adapt. End of discussion." She wanted to keep fighting, but she could see it wouldn't do any good. So she just nodded and let it drop. Billy was finally well enough to sit up by the end of the week. His leg was healing, the infection gone, the bones starting to knit back together. He'd never walk quite right again. Mara could see that already in the way the bone had set, but he'd walk. That was more than anyone had expected. "You did good," he told her one afternoon while she changed his bandages. "You did the hard part." "Nah, I just screamed a lot. You did the actual work." He watched her wrap fresh cloth around his calf. "The men are talking, you know, about what you did." "I know. Not just setting my leg. Everything. The way you don't quit, even when things are hard." He paused. "You remind them that hard doesn't mean impossible." She didn't know what to say to that. "Boss is different around you too," Billy added. "Lighter somehow. Like he's not carrying as much." "I don't think that's because of me." "I do." He grinned. "You gonna marry him?" She nearly dropped the bandage. "What?" "You heard me. I'm not marrying anyone." "Why not? You like him. He likes you. Everyone can see it." "It's not that simple." "Sure it is. Life's short. Might as well spend it with someone who makes it better. She finished the bandage in silence, then left before he could say anything else. But his words stuck with her. Did she like Caleb? Yes? Did that mean anything? She didn't know. Couldn't let herself think about it too hard because thinking about it meant hoping, and hope was dangerous. The weather warmed slightly in late December, enough for Caleb and Dutch to make the trip to Larson. They left at dawn, taking the wagon and 2 spare horses. We'll be back in 3 days, Caleb told Mara. Maybe 4 if the roads are bad. Be careful. Always am. He hesitated, like he wanted to say something else, then just nodded and left. Mara watched him right away and tried to ignore the knot in her stomach. The ranch felt empty with him gone. The men were quieter, more subdued. Even Billy, who'd been getting more animated as he healed, seemed withdrawn. You miss him too? Mara asked, bringing him lunch. Boss? Yeah, place doesn't run right without him. It's running fine. You know what I mean. She did. That night, she couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about Caleb on the road, exposed to weather and bandits and 100 other dangers. Kept imagining the wagon overturning, the horses bolting, him lying in the snow the way she had. She got up, made tea, sat by the fire. Told herself she was being ridiculous. He'd made this trip dozens of times. He'd be fine. But the worry didn't fade. On the second day, a rider came from town. Not Caleb, someone else. Someone Mara didn't recognize. She answered the door, heart in her throat. Yes? Message for Mara Hale. That's me. He handed her a folded piece of paper, then left without another word. Mara opened it with shaking hands. The words were short, direct, clear. Leave the double cross by the end of the week, or we'll make sure you regret staying. It wasn't signed. Didn't need to be. She stood there, staring at the paper, feeling the walls close in. This was it. The thing she'd been waiting for. The proof that she couldn't win, couldn't stay, couldn't have this. She should have felt defeated. Instead, she felt angry. They wanted her gone? Fine. But she wasn't leaving because they'd scared her. If she left, it would be on her terms, for her reasons, not because some small-minded shopkeeper thought she knew what was decent. She burned the note in the fire and got back to work. Caleb and Dutch returned on the 4th day, wagon loaded with supplies from Larson. Caleb looked exhausted, face windburned and eyes hollow. Good trip? Mara asked. Long. He climbed down, wincing. Roads were worse than I thought. You should rest. Later. Need to unload first. She helped where she could, carrying lighter things while the men handled the heavy sacks. Caleb kept glancing at her, like he was checking to make sure she was real. When the wagon was empty and the men had scattered, he found her in the kitchen. Something happened while I was gone. What makes you think that? You've got that look. The one you get when you're trying not to show you're upset. She should have lied. Should have brushed it off. Instead, she told him about the note. His face went dark. Show me. I burned it. What did it say? She told him, word for word. He stood very still, the kind of still that meant violence was about to happen. Who delivered it? I don't know. Some rider. Did he say anything? No. Caleb turned, headed for the door. Where are you going? Into town? No. She grabbed his arm. That's what they want. You ride in angry. You give them an excuse to make this worse. I don't care. I do. She held on, even when he tried to pull away. Please, don't make this bigger than it already is. He stopped, looked down at her hand on his arm, then at her face. They threatened you. I've been threatened before. Not like this. Exactly like this. And you going into town won't change anything except maybe getting you hurt or arrested or both. He wanted to argue. She could see it in every line of his body, but eventually he nodded. Fine, but if they try anything else, then we'll deal with it together. That seemed to satisfy him. He covered her hand with his just for a moment, then let go. I'm glad you're okay, he said quietly. So am I. That night she lay awake again, but this time it wasn't worry keeping her up. It was the memory of his hand on hers, warm and steady, and the look in his eyes that said he'd go to war for her if she asked. She wasn't sure what scared her more, the threat from the town, or the fact that she was starting to believe she might actually deserve someone willing to fight for her. January came in mean, with temperatures that froze spit before it hit the ground and wind that cut through every wall in the bunkhouse. The men huddled closer to the stove, tempers running short. Mara kept them fed, kept the coffee hot, and tried not to think about the silence from town. A week passed, then 2. No more notes. No more riders. Just quiet, which somehow felt worse than the threat. "They're planning something," Dutch said one morning, warming his hands around a cup. "Quiet like this means they're talking, deciding what to do next." "Or they've moved on," Mara said, though she didn't believe it. "People like that don't move on. They dig in." Caleb said nothing, just stared out the window at the white landscape. He'd been quieter since the note, watching the road like he expected trouble to come riding up any minute. Billy was walking again, slow and careful, leaning heavy on a crutch Tomas had carved from a thick branch. The limp was permanent. His left leg would always be shorter now, the bone having healed at a slight angle. But he was alive and mobile, and that was more than anyone had hoped for in those first terrible hours. "I'm going into town," he announced at breakfast one morning. Every head turned. "The hell you are," Caleb said. "I need to thank the doctor for not having to come out in that blizzard." Billy grinned, but there was steel underneath it. "And I want to look those merchants in the eye and let them know I'm alive because of Mara, not in spite of her." "That's a bad idea." "Probably, but I'm doing it anyway." Caleb looked at Mara. She shrugged. "He's grown. Can't stop him." "I can try." Billy stood, wobbling slightly on the crutch. "Boss, I respect you. You know I do. But this matters. They need to see what she did, what she's capable of." "They don't care what she's capable of. They care that she's different." "Then maybe it's time someone made them care about the right things." The two men stared at each other. Finally, Caleb sighed. "You're taking Tomas with you, and you're armed?" "Yes, sir." They left after lunch, Billy on horseback despite his protests that he could handle the wagon. Mara watched them go with a knot in her stomach that wouldn't loosen. "He'll be fine," Caleb said beside her. "You don't know that." "No, but he's tougher than he looks." They came back 3 hours later. Billy's face was stormy, Tomas looked grim, and neither of them spoke until they were inside with the door shut. "Well?" Caleb asked. Billy threw his hat on the table. "They wouldn't serve me." "What?" "Walked into the general store, told Mrs. Hewitt I wanted to thank her for the supplies she'd sold us in the past. She looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her boot and said the double cross wasn't welcome anymore. Any of us." "What did you say?" "I told her I was alive because of Mara Hale's skill and courage, and if she had a problem with that, she could take it up with me directly. She said her problem wasn't with me, it was with the indecency of a woman living unmarried among men, and that until the situation was remedied, she wouldn't be selling us anything." Mara felt her face go hot. "Unmarried? That's what she said." "So the problem isn't that I'm here, it's that I'm not some cowboy's wife." "Apparently." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "Of course, because a woman can't just exist on her own. She has to belong to someone." Caleb's jaw was working, muscle jumping beneath the skin. "What else?" Billy exchanged a look with Tomas. "There's talk of getting the sheriff involved, claiming the situation is improper, that it's affecting the moral character of the town. The sheriff's 3 counties over and couldn't care less about Cedar Bluff's moral character. Maybe. But if enough people make noise, he might feel obligated to check it out." "Let him. There's nothing illegal about hiring a cook." "No," Billy said slowly. "But there's nothing illegal about making it difficult for you to do business either. And if the whole town decides to freeze you out, there's not much the law can do about it." The room fell silent. Mara could feel the weight of it, the impossibility of the situation. The town had found their leverage, and they were going to use it. "I should go," she said. "No." Caleb's voice was flat. "If I'm not here, they can't use this against you." "I said no." "Caleb, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. You're the one talking about running away." "I'm talking about saving your ranch." "My ranch doesn't need saving. It needs people who know when to stand their ground." She wanted to argue, but the look on his face stopped her. He wasn't angry, he was something else, something determined and immovable and maybe a little bit desperate. "What do you suggest then?" she asked quietly. He opened his mouth, then closed it, looked away. "I don't know yet. but we'll figure it out. That night, Mara couldn't sleep again. She stood at the kitchen window, staring out at the snow-covered yard, and tried to think of a solution that didn't involve her leaving. Nothing came. Footsteps behind her. She turned to find Caleb in the doorway, dressed but clearly having given up on sleep too. "You should rest," he said. "So should you." He came to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. They stood in silence for a long moment, just watching the night. "I meant what I said," Caleb finally spoke, "about not letting them run you off. I know. But I also know I can't force you to stay if you want to go." She looked at him. In the dim light from the dying fire, his face was all shadows and sharp angles. "Do you want me to stay?" "Yes." The simplicity of it hit her harder than any elaborate speech would have. Just yes. No qualifications, no conditions. "Why?" she asked. "Because you make this place better. Because the men respect you. Because you don't quit, even when everything's stacked against you." He turned to face her fully. "Because He stopped, swallowed, started again. "Because when you're not here, the house feels empty in a way it didn't before you came. And I don't want to go back to that." Her heart was doing something complicated and uncomfortable in her chest. "Caleb, I'm not asking you for anything," he said quickly. "I'm just telling you why I want you to stay. The decision's still yours." She should say something, should tell him she felt the same way, that leaving would hurt more than staying, that somewhere in the last 4 months this place had stopped being just a job and started being something else. But the words stuck in her throat, so she just nodded. He nodded back, and they stood there in the dark kitchen, not touching, but not separate either, until the cold drove them both back to bed. Morning brought fresh snow and a rider from town. Not a threat this time, an invitation. The town council wanted to meet with Caleb to discuss the situation. "It's a trap," Dutch said immediately. "Probably," Caleb agreed. "You're not going." "I am." "Boss, if they want to talk, I'll talk. Maybe we can reach some kind of understanding." Mara doubted it, but she kept quiet. This was Caleb's decision to make. He left at noon, taking Dutch despite the older man's protest that someone less hot-headed should go. They returned just before dinner, both looking like they'd chewed glass. "How bad?" Mara asked. Caleb poured himself whiskey, drank it in one swallow. "They want you gone by the end of the month. If you're still here after that, they're going to petition to have the ranch declared a public nuisance and shut down. Can they do that? Probably not. But they can make the process so expensive and time-consuming that it might as well be the same thing." "What did you tell them?" "That they could go to hell." Dutch snorted. He was more polite than that, but not by much. "They also suggested," Caleb continued, voice tight, "that the situation could be resolved if you were properly married to one of the ranch hands. Then it would be respectable." Mara felt her face flush with anger and humiliation. "They want me to marry someone so they don't have to feel uncomfortable about my existence." "That's about the size of it. Did you tell them that was insane?" In slightly different words, yes. She turned away, gripping the counter so hard her knuckles went white. Behind her, she could hear Dutch making his excuses and leaving. Then it was just her and Caleb in the kitchen, the silence stretching. "I could do it," Caleb said quietly. She turned. "What?" "Marry you. If that's what it takes to keep you here and keep them off our backs, I'd do it." Her heart stopped. "You can't be serious." "Why not? We get along. You already run the household. It would just make it official." "That's not how marriage works." "Isn't it? Half the marriages I've seen were practical arrangements. This would be no different. Except it would be a lie." "Would it?" He looked at her, and there was something raw in his expression. "I told you last night I don't want you to leave. I meant it. If marrying you keeps you here, then I'm willing to do it. Out of obligation. Out of choice." She didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to untangle the mess of emotions in her chest. Anger at the town, frustration at the situation, and something warm and terrifying at the idea that Caleb Ross would marry her just to keep her safe. "I need to think," she finally said. "Take all the time you need." But time was the one thing they didn't have. 2 days later, another writer came. This one brought a letter on official town council letterhead stating formally that Mara Hale was to vacate the Double Cross Ranch within 3 weeks or face legal action for moral corruption and public indecency. Mara read it twice, then set it on the table. "Well," she said to the empty kitchen, "that's clear enough. She found Caleb in his barn, checking on a mare that was due to foal any day. He looked up when she came in, and she saw the question in his eyes before he asked it. Did you decide?" "No, but I think we need to talk about what happens if I say yes." He set down the brush he'd been using and came to stand in front of her. "What do you want to know? Would it be real, the marriage? As real as we make it?" "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to tell you that I'm not proposing out of pity or obligation or because it's convenient. I'm proposing because the idea of you leaving makes me feel like someone's carved out part of my chest, and I'd rather spend the rest of my life figuring out what this thing between us is than watch you ride away." She couldn't breathe. "Caleb." "But I also know I can't ask you to tie yourself to me just because some small-minded fools think they have a say in how you live your life. So if you want to leave, if you want to go somewhere else and start over where people won't judge you, I'll understand. I'll help you get there. I'll make sure you have enough money to make it work." "I don't want your money." "Then what do you want?" The question hung in the air between them. What did she want? She wanted to stay. She wanted to keep cooking for these stubborn, loyal men who'd become something like family. She wanted to keep sitting across from Caleb at breakfast and watching him try not to smile at her sharper comments. She wanted to belong somewhere. But wanting wasn't the same as deserving, and she'd learned a long time ago not to trust her own desires. "I want to know if you're asking because you want to or because you think you have to," she said. "I want to." His voice was steady, sure. "I've wanted to for a while now. The town just gave me an excuse." "That's a terrible reason to propose." "I know, but it's what I've got." She almost smiled. Almost. "If we do this," she said slowly, "people are going to say I trapped you, that I used my position to manipulate you into marriage. Let them say it. I don't care. You should. Reputation matters out here." "Not as much as you do." The warmth in her chest was getting harder to ignore. She wanted to say yes, wanted to take what he was offering and pretend it could work, but fear held her back. Fear that she'd be a burden. Fear that he'd regret it. Fear that this fragile thing between them would crack under the weight of obligation and resentment. "Can I have a few more days?" she asked. "Take as long as you need." But that night, everything changed. Mara was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner when she heard horses. Multiple horses, moving fast. She went to the window and saw lights, torches, maybe 6 or 7 of them, coming up the road from town. Her stomach dropped. She moved to the door, stepped out onto the porch. Caleb was already there, rifle in hand. Behind him, the men were emerging from the bunkhouse, armed and wary. The riders stopped at the edge of the yard. In the torchlight, Mara could make out faces, merchants from town, the blacksmith, a few men she didn't recognize. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Caleb called out, voice deceptively calm. One of them rode forward. The blacksmith, a man named Turner, with arms like tree trunks and a mean streak a mile wide. "We're here to collect the woman." "You're not collecting anyone." "She's been given notice to leave. We're here to make sure she complies. She has 3 weeks. We've decided that's too long. She goes tonight, or we'll remove her ourselves." The men behind Caleb shifted, hands moving to weapons. The tension ratcheted up another notch. "You're not touching her," Caleb said, voice gone cold and hard. "Then you're harboring someone in violation of the town's moral standards. That makes you complicit." "The town doesn't have jurisdiction over my land." "We'll see about that." Turner made a gesture, and 2 of the riders started to dismount. Caleb raised the rifle. "Stay on your horses." "Or what? You'll shoot us?" "If I have to." "That's murder." "That's self-defense. You're trespassing on my property with clear intent to cause harm. Law's on my side." Turner's face twisted with anger. "You're choosing a cripple over your own community, over people who've known you for years. I'm choosing someone who's earned my respect over people who've done nothing but prove they don't deserve it." The words hit like stones. Mara felt something crack open in her chest. Sharp and painful and good. "Last chance," Turner said. "Send her out and we'll leave peacefully." "No." For a moment, Mara thought Turner would back down. Then she saw his hand move toward his belt, saw the glint of metal, and everything slowed down. She opened her mouth to shout a warning, but Caleb was already moving. The rifle came up, the crack of the shot impossibly loud in the cold air. Turner's hat flew off his head. "Next one goes lower," Caleb said. The riders scattered, horses wheeling and stamping. Shouts filled the air, angry and scared. One of the unknown men raised a pistol, and Dutch shot it out of his hand. "Get out of here!" Caleb roared. "Now!" They went, torches bobbing wildly as they galloped back toward town. The last one, Turner, hatless and furious, turned in his saddle. "This isn't over." "Yeah, it is," Caleb called back. "You come onto my land again, I'll kill you. That's a promise." They disappeared into the darkness, the sound of hooves fading. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Caleb lowered the rifle, shoulders sagging. "Everyone okay?" A chorus of affirmatives. Dutch walked over to pick up the pistol he'd shot from the rider's hand, examined it. "Nice shot, boss. Didn't want to kill anyone. Would have been justified if you had." "Maybe." Caleb turned to look at Mara, still standing on the porch. "You all right?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Get inside," he said gently. "All of you, we need to talk." They gathered in the main room, men packed in shoulder to shoulder. Caleb stood by the fireplace, face grim. "They'll be back," he said. "Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but they will be back, and next time they won't come to talk." "Let them come," one of the younger cowboys said. "We'll be ready." "That's not the point. The point is, this has gone beyond a disagreement about decency. They're willing to use force now. That means we either give them what they want or we prepare for war." "We don't give them anything," Dutch said, and several men nodded. "I appreciate the loyalty, but I need you all to understand what you're signing up for. If we dig in, if we refuse to back down, there will be consequences. They could burn us out, could ambush us on the road, could get the law involved in ways we can't predict." "So what do you want us to do?" Billy asked. Caleb looked around the room, meeting each man's eyes. "I want you to decide. This is Mara's fight, and mine. But it affects all of you. If anyone wants to leave, to find work somewhere else before this gets worse, I'll understand. No hard feelings." Silence. Then Dutch spoke up. "I stayed through the drought of 79, through the winter of 81 when we lost half the herd, through the rustlers in 83. You think I'm leaving now because some shopkeeper got uppity? I'm staying," Billy said. "Mara saved my life. Far as I'm concerned, that makes her family." "Family," another man echoed, and suddenly they were all talking, voices overlapping, every single one of them saying they'd stay. Caleb's throat worked. "Thank you." Mara felt tears burning behind her eyes. She'd spent so long thinking she had to face everything alone, had to prove she could survive without help. But here were a dozen men willing to risk everything because they decided she mattered. After the men had filed out, leaving just her and Caleb, she finally let herself speak. "You could have sent me away. Ended this before it started." "I could have. Didn't want to." "Why not?" He crossed to where she stood, stopped close enough that she could see the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "Because you're the first person in 10 years who's made me think about something other than just surviving. Because you look at me like I'm not just the boss or the man who signs the paychecks, but someone who might be worth knowing. Because..." He stopped, took a breath. "Because I love you." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Caleb, I know it's too soon. I know this is a terrible time to say it. But if we're about to go to war, I wanted you to know. Not because I'm trying to pressure you into anything, but because you deserve to know that this isn't just about protecting an employee or doing the right thing. This is about protecting someone I can't imagine living without." She couldn't speak, could barely breathe. All she could do was stare at him and try to process the fact that someone like Caleb Ross, strong, stubborn, good, could love someone like her. "You don't have to say anything," he said quietly. "I just needed you to know." But she did need to say something, needed to tell him that she felt the same way, that she'd been falling for him since the day he'd sat beside her on the kitchen floor and told her she was worth fighting for. "I love you too," she said, and watched his eyes go wide. "I don't know when it happened or how, but I do. And it terrifies me because I keep waiting for you to realize you made a mistake, that I'm not worth all this trouble." "You are." "How can you be sure?" "Because loving you isn't trouble. It's the easiest thing I've ever done." He reached up, cupped her face with one calloused hand. Everything else is hard. This is simple. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. Nothing about this is simple. No, but that doesn't make it any less true. When she opened her eyes, he was closer, and she could feel the warmth of his breath on her face. Marry me, he said. Not because the town demands it, not because it's convenient, but because I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Because I want to wake up every morning knowing you're here, because you make everything better just by existing. That's still a terrible proposal. I know, but it's honest. She laughed, shaky and wet. Yes. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. He kissed her then, gentle and careful, like she might break. She kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into it, all her fear and hope and desperate love. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. We'll do it tomorrow, he said, before anything else can happen. There's no one to perform the ceremony. We'll go to Larson. There's a judge there who owes me a favor. Caleb, I'm not waiting 3 weeks for the town to make another move. If we're doing this, we're doing it now. She should argue, should point out all the reasons this was rushed and impractical and potentially foolish. But all she could think about was the fact that in less than 24 hours, she'd be Mara Ross. Okay, she said, tomorrow. They told the men at breakfast. The announcement was met with cheers, backslapping, and Dutch demanding to know why he hadn't been consulted first. Because you would have talked me out of it, Caleb said, grinning. Damn right I would have, but too late now. Dutch turned to Mara. You sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. He laughed. Good enough. They left at dawn, Caleb, Mara, Dutch, and Billy, who insisted on coming despite his legs still being weak. The ride to Larson took most of the day, the cold biting through every layer they wore. The judge was a small man with wire-rimmed glasses and a skeptical expression that deepened when Caleb explained what they needed. You want to get married today? Yes, sir. Any particular reason for the rush? Several, none of them illegal. The judge studied them both, then sighed. All right, but I'm charging extra for the inconvenience. Fair enough? The ceremony took 10 minutes. They stood in the judge's cramped office, Dutch and Billy as witnesses, and said words Mara barely heard over the pounding of her heart. When the judge pronounced them married, Caleb kissed her again, and this time it felt real. They were married. On the ride back, Dutch kept shaking his head. This is insane. You know that, right? Completely, Caleb agreed. The town's going to lose their minds. Let them. But Mara was quiet, staring at the thin gold band Caleb had bought from the general store in Larson. It was too big, spinning loose on her finger, but it was real. She was married. To Caleb Ross. It didn't feel real yet, but maybe it would. Maybe after they got home and told the men and faced whatever came next, it would start to feel like something more than a desperate gamble. You okay? Caleb asked, riding close beside her. Ask me in a week. He smiled. Fair enough. They reached the ranch after dark, exhausted and frozen. The men were waiting, and when Caleb announced they'd done it, the bunkhouse erupted in celebration. To the boss and his bride, someone shouted, and suddenly there was whiskey being passed around and terrible singing filling the air. Mara stood in the middle of it all, overwhelmed and grateful and terrified, while Caleb's hand found hers and squeezed. No going back now, he murmured in her ear. No, she agreed. There's not. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, that didn't feel like a bad thing. The celebration lasted until well past midnight, whiskey flowing and men who normally kept to themselves suddenly finding reasons to clap Caleb on the shoulder or tell Mara she'd made a good choice. She sat at the kitchen table, watching it all with a strange sense of disconnect, like she was observing someone else's life. Dutch finally shooed everyone out around 2 a.m, declaring that married folks needed their privacy. The sudden quiet felt louder than the noise had been. Caleb stood by the door watching her. You can take the bed. I'll sleep on the floor. We're married. I know, but that doesn't mean... He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. I don't want you to feel obligated. She almost laughed. Here they were, married for all of 12 hours, and already tiptoeing around each other like strangers. Come to bed, Caleb. We're both too tired for this. They lay on opposite sides of the mattress, a careful distance between them, both staring at the ceiling. Outside, the wind howled against the house. This is awkward, Mara said finally. Yeah. We should probably talk about it. Probably. Neither of them moved. I meant what I said, Caleb said quietly. About loving you. I know. But I also know this isn't how things are supposed to happen. We should have had time, courting, proper proposals, all that. I don't need proper. What do you need? She thought about it. Honesty and patience while we figure out what this is. I can do that. He turned his head to look at her. Are you scared? Terrified. Me too. Somehow, that helped. They fell asleep like that, close but not touching, and when Mara woke up in the morning, Caleb's arm was across her waist and her head was on his chest. It should have felt wrong. Instead, it felt inevitable. She extracted herself carefully, trying not to wake him, and went to start breakfast. The men filtered in slowly, some hungover, all grinning. Morning, Mrs. Ross, Billy said, and she nearly dropped the pan. Mrs. Ross. That was her now. The name felt foreign in her mouth, like borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit. Just Mara, she said. Nah, you're Mrs. Ross now. Gotta get used to it. Caleb appeared in the doorway, hair mussed and eyes still heavy with sleep. Leave her alone. We're just being friendly. You're being pests. Eat your breakfast. They ate, but the teasing didn't stop. By the time the meal was over, Mara's face hurt from trying not to smile. These men, rough, weathered, and loyal to their bones, had decided to claim her as one of their own. It was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying all at once. After everyone had scattered to their work, Dutch lingered. You did good, he said. I didn't do anything except say yes. That's doing something, especially when saying no would have been easier. He picked up his hat, turned it in his hands. Boss has been alone a long time. Didn't think he'd ever let anyone close enough to matter. Glad he did. Me too. Just... He paused, choosing his words. Don't let him push you away when things get hard. He's got a habit of trying to carry everything himself. I noticed. Good. Then you'll know to call him on it. He left her alone with that thought in a sink full of dishes. Mara had just finished cleaning up when she heard horses. Multiple horses, moving fast. Her stomach clenched. Through the window, she saw riders coming up the road. More than last time, maybe 15 or 20. She moved to the door, heart pounding. Caleb was already coming from the barn, rifle in hand. The men were appearing from various corners of the ranch, all armed. The riders stopped at the edge of the yard. Turner was there again, and beside him was a man Mara didn't recognize, older, dressed in a dark suit, wearing a badge. That the sheriff? She asked Dutch, who'd materialized beside her. Deputy, real sheriff's probably still 3 counties over. The deputy dismounted, walked forward with his hands visible. Caleb Ross? That's me. I'm Deputy Marshal Hendricks. I've been asked to investigate a complaint regarding the moral conduct of this ranch. What complaint? That you're harboring a woman in violation of decency standards. Caleb's jaw tightened. The woman in question is my wife. Hendricks blinked. Your wife? Married yesterday in Larson. Judge Whitmore presiding. You want to see the certificate? Yes. Yes, I do. Caleb went inside, came back with the paper. Hendricks studied it, frowning. This appears legitimate. It is legitimate. Turner pushed his horse forward. That doesn't change anything. They only got married to avoid prosecution. Prosecution for what? Hendricks asked. Being unmarried isn't a crime. It's indecent. That's a moral judgment, not a legal one. Hendricks handed the certificate back to Caleb. As far as I can see, there's no crime here. Man's got a right to marry who he wants. But she's... Turner gestured at Mara, face twisting with disgust. Look at her. She's crippled. This isn't a real marriage. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Caleb took a step forward and Mara saw murder in his eyes. Say that again. I said, be very careful how you finish that sentence. Hendricks stepped between them. Gentlemen, let's all take a breath. I don't need a breath. I need this man off my property. Mr. Turner, I think it's time you and your friends headed back to town. But now! Turner looked like he wanted to argue, but the deputy's hand had drifted to his sidearm. He wheeled his horse around, the others following. Before they left, he turned back one last time. This isn't over, Ross. You can't just change the rules because it's convenient. I'm not changing anything. I married the woman I love. If that bothers you, that's your problem, not mine." They rode off, dust rising in their wake. Hendricks watched them go, then turned back to Caleb. "You've made some enemies." "I'm aware. They're not going to let this go." "I know that too." Hendricks sighed. "Look, I'm not here to tell you how to run your life. But that group is angry and getting angrier. People do stupid things when they're angry. Is that a warning? It's advice. Watch your back." After the deputy left, the men gathered in the yard. No one spoke for a long moment. "They're going to come back," Billy said. "Let them," Caleb replied, voice hard. "We'll be ready." But being ready and being safe weren't the same thing, and everyone knew it. That night, Caleb posted guards, 2 men at a time, watching the road in shifts. It should have felt excessive. Instead, it felt necessary. Mara lay awake, listening to Caleb's breathing beside her. He wasn't asleep either. "Talk to me," she said. "About what?" "About what you're thinking." He was quiet for a long time. "I'm thinking I should send you away, somewhere safe." "No." "Mara, I'm not leaving. We already had this argument." "That was before they showed up with a deputy, before Turner made it clear he's not going to stop." "I don't care what Turner wants." "You should. He's dangerous." "So are you." He turned to look at her. "That's different." "Why? Because you're trying to protect something instead of destroy it?" She propped herself up on one elbow. "I'm staying, Caleb. We're in this together now. I just got you. I'm not ready to lose you." "Then don't. But don't push me away either." He reached up, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're stubborn." "So are you. We're well matched." He almost smiled. "Yeah, we are." They fell asleep holding hands, and when morning came, nothing had changed, but everything felt different. The next few days passed in tense quiet. No more riders from town, no more threats. Just waiting. Mara threw herself into work, cooking and cleaning with a ferocity that bordered on manic. If she stopped moving, she'd start thinking, and thinking led to worrying, and worrying led nowhere good. Caleb noticed. "You're going to work yourself to death." "I'm fine." "You're exhausting yourself." I said I'm fine. He caught her arm as she tried to move past him. "Talk to me." "About what?" "About whatever's eating at you." She pulled free, frustrated. "I'm scared, all right? I'm scared they're going to come back and someone's going to get hurt, and it'll be my fault. I'm scared you're going to wake up one day and realize you made a mistake. I'm scared that I don't know how to be a wife, that I'm going to fail at this the way I've failed at everything else." "You haven't failed at anything. My parents died because I couldn't get help fast enough. I lost the use of my leg because I was careless with a wagon. I've been fired from 3 jobs because people couldn't stand looking at me. Don't tell me I haven't failed. None of that was your fault." "Wasn't it?" She laughed, bitter. "I'm the common factor, Caleb. Every disaster, every loss, every time things fall apart, I'm there." He grabbed her shoulders, gentle but firm. "Listen to me. Your parents died because fever doesn't care how fast you run. Your leg was hurt because accidents happen. Those jobs fired you because people are small and cruel, not because you deserved it. And this situation with the town? This is on them, not you. You don't know that. I do. Because I know you. And you're not the problem here. You've never been the problem." She wanted to believe him, wanted to let go of the guilt she'd been carrying for so long it felt like part of her skeleton. But belief was hard when you'd spent years learning to expect the worst. "I'm trying," she said quietly. "I know. And that's all I'm asking." He pulled her into his arms, and she let herself lean into him just for a moment, just long enough to remember what it felt like to be held. A week after the deputy's visit, supplies started running low again. They needed flour, sugar, coffee, basics that would require another trip to Larson. "I'll go," Dutch volunteered. "Take Billy and Tomas," Caleb said. "And be careful." They left at dawn. Mara watched them go with the same sick feeling she'd had every time someone left the ranch lately, like she might not see them again. "They'll be fine," Caleb said. "You don't know that." "No, but worrying won't change anything." She hated that he was right. They were gone 2 days. When they came back, the wagon was only half full. "What happened?" Caleb asked.
Dutch's face was grim. Larson's shopkeepers won't sell to us either. Word spread from Cedar Bluff. They're saying we're troublemakers. All of them? Most. We got some basics from a widow who didn't care about the gossip, but that's it. Caleb swore, long and creative. How long will what we have last? A month, maybe 6 weeks if we're careful. And then? Then we're in trouble.
That night Caleb called a meeting. All the men gathered in the main room, faces serious. You all know the situation, Caleb started. Town's cut us off, and now it's spreading. We can't get supplies, which means we can't operate. I've been thinking about solutions, and I don't have many good ones. We could raid Cedar Bluff, one of the younger cowboys suggested. Take what we need. That makes us criminals. No. We could leave, another said. Move the operation somewhere else. Where? Every town within 100 miles is going to hear about this. We'd just be running toward the same problem. Dutch leaned forward. What if we bypassed the towns entirely? Went straight to suppliers in Denver or Cheyenne? That's weeks of travel in both directions. By the time we got back, we'd need to leave again. The room fell silent. Mara could feel the weight of it, the impossibility settling over them like snow. There has to be something, Billy said. If there is, I haven't thought of it yet. Mara stood. Every eye turned to her. What if we didn't need the towns? How do you mean? Caleb asked. We're a ranch. We have land. We could grow more of what we need, raise more livestock, make ourselves self-sufficient. That takes time, and it doesn't solve the immediate problem. No, but it solves the long-term one. She looked around the room. The towns want us dependent on them so they can control us. What if we removed that power? She's got a point, Dutch said slowly. We've got water, good grazing land. We could expand the garden, put in more crops. Still doesn't feed us this month. No, Mara agreed. But I might have an idea for that too. Everyone waited. We go to the miners. Silence. The mining camps? Caleb asked carefully. Yes, they need food. They're too far from any town to rely on regular supplies, and they've got money from the gold they're pulling out. We could trade directly with them. The camps are rough, dangerous. So is starving. He studied her, conflict clear on his face. It could work, but someone would have to go up there and negotiate. That's a hard trip. I'll do it? Absolutely not. Why not? I'm the one who suggested it. Because those camps eat people alive. I'm not sending my wife into that. Then come with me. He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Looked around at the men, then back at her. This is insane. Probably. But do you have a better idea? He didn't. They left 2 days later. Caleb, Mara, Dutch, and Billy. The mining camps were high in the mountains, accessible only by narrow trails that turned treacherous in winter. The trip took 3 days, each one colder and harder than the last. Mara's legs screamed the entire time. By the second day, she could barely walk when they stopped to make camp. Caleb noticed, offered to turn back. She refused. We're almost there. You're in pain. I'm always in pain. This is just worse than usual. Mara, don't, please. I need to do this. He didn't understand, not really, but he let it go. The mining camp appeared on the 4th day, a cluster of rough cabins and tents clinging to the mountainside. Smoke rose from various fires, and the sound of picks hitting rock echoed through the valley. They rode in slowly, hands visible. Men stopped working to watch them pass, eyes hard and suspicious. Let me do the talking, Caleb murmured. They found the camp boss in a larger cabin near the center, a man named Sullivan with a scar across his throat and eyes that had seen everything twice. What do you want? He asked, not bothering with pleasantries. To talk business. What kind? The food kind. We're ranchers. You're miners. Seems like we could help each other out. Sullivan looked them over. You're from the Double Cross. You've heard of us. I've heard you're having trouble with Cedar Bluff. Heard they're trying to run you out. They're trying. We're still here. For now. Sullivan leaned back in his chair. Why should I do business with someone who might not be around in a month? Because we will be around, and because your men need better food than whatever garbage the traders are bringing up here at 3 times the normal price. Sullivan smiled, cold and calculating.
You're not wrong. What are you offering?
Caleb laid out their proposal: regular deliveries of meat, vegetables, bread, fresh goods twice a month, preserved goods weekly. Fair prices, reliable delivery. And what do you want in return? Cash? And maybe a little protection if things get worse. Protection. Sullivan turned the word over. You're asking me to pick a side. I'm asking you to make a business decision. You need food. We need money. Whether Cedar Bluff likes it or not isn't your concern. Sullivan studied them for a long moment, then laughed. I like you. You've got guts. He stood, offered his hand. Deal. But you miss a delivery. We're done. Understood. They shook on it, and just like that, the double-cross had a lifeline. On the way back down the mountain, Caleb kept looking at Mara like he was seeing her for the first time. What? She finally asked. You did it. Found a way out when I couldn't see one. We did it, together.
No. This was you. He pulled his horse closer, reached over to take her hand. You're incredible. She didn't feel incredible. She felt exhausted and sore and deeply uncertain about whether this would actually work. But Caleb's hand was warm in hers, and for the moment, that was enough. They got back to the ranch to find the men tense and armed. Dutch's horse had thrown a shoe 2 miles out, and they'd sent Billy ahead to warn the others. When Caleb and Mara rode in, the relief was palpable. Everything okay? Caleb asked. Riders came by yesterday, one of the younger cowboys said. Didn't stop, just rode past slow, watching. How many? 5. They say anything? No, just looked. Mara felt ice settle in her stomach. They were being watched now, studied. The town was waiting for something, an opening, a mistake, any excuse to make their move. Double the guard, Caleb ordered. No one goes anywhere alone. That night, lying in bed, Mara asked the question that had been bothering her. What do you think they're waiting for? An excuse, or enough anger to stop caring about excuses? How long do we have? I don't know. She turned to face him. I'm glad we got married. He looked surprised. Yeah? Yeah. If something happens, at least I won't die wondering what could have been. Nothing's going to happen. You don't know that. No, but I'm choosing to believe it anyway. He pulled her closer. We're going to be fine. The deal with the miners will work. We'll figure out the self-sufficiency thing, and eventually the town will realize they can't bully us into leaving. You really believe that? I have to. The alternative is giving up, and I'm not doing that. She wished she had his certainty, but she settled for his warmth instead, pressing close and trying not to think about riders in the dark or threats yet to come. The first delivery to the mining camp went smoothly. They sent Dutch and 3 others with a wagon full of fresh meat, vegetables Mara had managed to preserve, and bread she'd spent 2 days baking. They came back with enough money to buy supplies from a traveling trader who didn't care about Cedar Bluff's opinion. The second delivery went just as well, and the third. By the end of February, they'd established a rhythm. The ranch was surviving, more than surviving, thriving. The men were working harder than ever, taking pride in the fact that they'd found a way around the town's blockade. But the town wasn't done. It happened on a Tuesday. Mara was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard shouting from outside. She grabbed her cane and moved as fast as she could to the door. In the yard, smoke was rising from the barn. Fire! Someone screamed. Men were running, grabbing buckets, forming a line to the water trough. Caleb was already at the barn, pulling horses out, his face black with soot. Mara's mind went blank with terror. The barn held their livelihood. Horses, equipment, winter feed. If it burned, they were finished. She grabbed a bucket and joined the line, passing water hand to hand, ignoring the pain in her leg. Someone bumped into her and she went down hard, her cane clattering away. Strong hands pulled her up, Billy, his face grim. Get inside! No! You're going to get trampled. But she shook him off and kept working, kept passing buckets, kept moving even when her leg gave out and she had to work from her knees. It took 2 hours to get the fire under control. By then, half the barn was gone, along with most of the winter feed and 3 stalls worth of equipment. The men stood in the yard, exhausted and filthy, staring at the wreckage. Caleb walked over to where Mara sat on the ground, unable to stand. He crouched beside her. You okay? No? Me neither. Dutch appeared, holding something. Found this.
It was a torch, partially burned but unmistakable. It was set, Dutch said quietly. The words hung in the air like smoke. Who? Mara asked, though she already knew. Does it matter? Caleb's voice was flat, empty. They made their point. What point? That they're willing to commit arson? That they're willing to do whatever it takes to run us off? He stood, staring at the ruined barn. And they're not going to stop until we're gone, or they are. The men gathered closer, waiting for orders. Caleb looked at each of them in turn. I'm not running, he said, but I can't ask you to stay for this. If anyone wants to leave, now's the time. No shame in it. No one moved. We stay, Dutch said simply. All of us. The others nodded. Caleb's throat worked. All right then. We rebuild. And we wait for them to make their next move. And when they do? Billy asked. Caleb's expression went hard. We make sure it's their last. They spent the next 3 days clearing the wreckage and salvaging what they could. The barn was a total loss, but some of the equipment survived, and miraculously, none of the horses had been seriously injured. Still, the damage was severe enough that rebuilding would take weeks, maybe months. Mara watched the men work from the kitchen window, her hands busy kneading dough but her mind elsewhere. The fire had changed something. Before, the conflict with the town had felt abstract, like a problem that could be negotiated or waited out. Now it was concrete. They'd crossed a line from intimidation to violence, and there was no going back from that. Caleb came in around noon, face streaked with ash and sweat. He washed his hands at the basin without speaking, movements mechanical. You need to eat, Mara said. Not hungry. Eat anyway. He sat, and she put a plate in front of him. He stared at it for a long moment before picking up the fork. We can't keep living like this, he said finally. I know. Something has to change. What are you thinking? He set down the fork. I'm thinking we need to stop reacting and start acting. They burned our barn. Next time it might be the house, or worse. We need to end this before someone gets killed. How? I don't know yet. But sitting here waiting for the next attack isn't a plan. She understood the frustration. She felt it too, a constant pressure building behind her ribs. But knowing something needed to change and knowing what to do about it were different problems. What if we went to the law? She suggested. Real law, not the deputy who's in the town's pocket. The territorial marshal is in Cheyenne. That's a week's ride. So we write a letter and hope he cares enough to come all the way out here to deal with what he'll see as a local dispute? That's a long shot. Better than no shot. He considered it. All right, we'll try it, but I'm not holding my breath. Mara drafted the letter that afternoon, detailing everything, the threats, the economic blockade, the deputized harassment, and finally the arson. She kept the language simple and factual, avoiding anything that could be dismissed as hysteria or exaggeration. When she finished, she showed it to Caleb. He read it twice. This is good. Better than I could have written. I spent 3 years writing advertisements for the boarding house, learned to make words count. It's more than that. You made it sound serious without sounding desperate. That's a skill. She hadn't thought of it that way, but maybe he was right. Maybe all those years of fighting to be taken seriously had taught her something useful after all. They sent the letter with a rider heading to Cheyenne for supplies. Whether it would make a difference remained to be seen. That night, Dutch approached Caleb with a suggestion. We should set traps. What kind? Tripwires, alarms. Things that'll warn us if someone's coming. They got close enough to torch the barn without anyone noticing. That can't happen again. Do it. Take whoever you need. Over the next week, the ranch transformed into something closer to a fortress. Tripwires ran between trees along the main approach. Bells were rigged to ring if the wires were disturbed. The men took turns on watch through the night, never fewer than 3 at a time. It should have made Mara feel safer. Instead, it made her feel like they were under siege. The siege mentality affected everyone differently. Some of the men grew quieter, more withdrawn. Others became aggressive, spoiling for a fight. Billy threw himself into rebuilding the barn with an intensity that bordered on obsession, working until his hands bled and his bad leg collapsed under him. You need to rest, Mara told him, finding him on the ground one evening, unable to stand. I'm fine. You're not. You're going to hurt yourself. Better than sitting around doing nothing. She understood that too.
The helplessness was its own kind of torture. She helped him up, let him lean on her as they made their way back to the bunkhouse. He was lighter than he should be, burning through calories faster than he could replace them. "You need to eat more," she said. "I eat plenty. You're wasting away." "So are you." She didn't have an argument for that. Her own reflection had become unfamiliar, sharper, harder, with shadows under her eyes that wouldn't fade no matter how much she slept. March came in wet, melting the snow and turning everything to mud. The roads became impassable, which meant no deliveries to the mining camp and no supplies coming in. They were stuck, isolated, living off what they had and hoping it would last. Caleb started taking longer rides, disappearing for hours at a time. Mara didn't ask where he went. She suspected he just needed space from the pressure, a few hours where he could breathe without feeling like the weight of everything was crushing him. One afternoon, she followed him. He rode north, toward the high pastures where the cattle grazed in summer. She kept her distance, staying back far enough that he wouldn't notice, but close enough not to lose him. Her leg protested every step, but she ignored it. He stopped at a ridge overlooking the valley. From here you could see for miles, mountains in one direction, plains in the other, and the ranch nestled in between like something precious and fragile. Mara dismounted, tied her horse, and walked the last 100 yards. Caleb heard her coming and turned. "You followed me." "I was worried." "I'm fine." "You keep saying that, but you're not." He turned back to the view. "I come up here when things get bad. Reminds me why I'm fighting." She came to stand beside him. "And why are you fighting?" "Because this is mine. I built it from nothing, turned it into something that matters. And I'll be damned if I let a bunch of small-minded cowards take it from me." "Is that all?" He glanced at her. "What do you mean? Is the ranch the only reason you're fighting? Or is there something else?" He was quiet for a long moment. "You're the something else." The words hit her square in the chest, knocking the air from her lungs. "Before you came, this place was just a place. Somewhere I worked, somewhere I slept. It wasn't a home. But you made it feel like one. Made me feel like I had something worth protecting beyond just the land and the cattle." He turned to face her fully. "So, yeah, I'm fighting for the ranch. But I'm fighting for you more. For us. For the life we're trying to build." Mara didn't realize she was crying until he reached up to wipe the tears from her face. "I don't know how to do this," she said, voice breaking. "I don't know how to be what you need. You already are, just by being here, just by not giving up. I'm scared." "Me too." They stood there on the ridge, holding each other while the wind howled around them, and for a moment the fear receded enough to let something else in. Hope, maybe, or just the stubborn refusal to let go of what they'd found. The attack came 2 weeks later, in the dead of night. Mara woke to the sound of bells ringing, frantic and discordant. Beside her, Caleb was already moving, pulling on boots and grabbing his rifle. "Stay here," he ordered. "Like hell." "Mara, I'm not hiding while you fight." He looked like he wanted to argue, but there was no time. Outside, shouts were rising, and the crack of gunfire split the night. They ran together, Mara's legs screaming in protest. In the yard, chaos reigned. Men were firing from behind cover at shapes moving in the darkness. Muzzle flashes lit up the night like lightning. "How many?" Caleb shouted to Dutch. "At least a dozen, maybe more." "Where's the fire?" "What?" "Where's the fire? Last time they tried to burn us out. Where are they hitting?" As if in answer, flames erupted from the new barn, half rebuilt, now burning. "Son of a—" Caleb raised his rifle and fired at a shadow darting between buildings. The shadow went down. Mara's mind was racing. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and if they kept fighting like this, someone was going to die. She thought about Billy's injury, about setting that bone with shaking hands and no real knowledge of what she was doing. She'd gotten lucky then. Luck ran out. "The kitchen!" she shouted to Caleb. "Get the wounded to the kitchen." "What?" "Anyone who gets hit, bring them to me. I can help." She didn't wait for his response, just ran back to the house, her cane forgotten in the urgency. Inside, she started moving furniture, clearing the big table, gathering every clean cloth she could find. Water. She needed water. And whiskey. And needle. And thread. The first wounded man came in 5 minutes later, one of the younger cowboys, shot in the shoulder. He was pale and shaking,
blood soaking through his shirt. "Sit," Mara ordered, and he obeyed. She cut away the shirt, examined the wound. The bullet had gone clean through, missing bone and major vessels. "Lucky." "This is going to hurt," she said, and started cleaning it. He screamed, but she kept working. Pack the wound, bandage it tight, move on to the next. The next was Billy, dragging another man who'd been shot in the leg. Billy himself had blood running down his face from a gash across his forehead. "You're hurt," Mara said. "I'm fine. Help him first." She helped them both, hands moving on autopilot while her mind stayed strangely calm. This she could do. This she understood. Injuries had solutions. You stopped bleeding, cleaned wounds, set bones. There were steps, procedures, things that worked if you did them right. More men came. A graze across the ribs. A bullet in the thigh that she had to dig out with a knife she sterilized in the fire first. Burns from fighting the flames. Each one she treated as best she could, keeping them stable, keeping them alive. Outside, the gunfire was getting closer. She could hear Caleb shouting orders, Dutch cursing, the thunder of hooves. Then the door burst open and Caleb stumbled in, supporting a man Mara didn't recognize. Not one of theirs, one of the attackers. "He's hit bad," Caleb said. "Do what you can." The man was bleeding from his stomach, face gray with shock. Mara knew that wound, knew what it meant, but she moved to him anyway because that was what you did. You helped, even when it was hopeless. She got him on the table, started trying to stop the bleeding, but there was too much of it, and it was coming from somewhere deep. Somewhere she couldn't reach without surgery. She didn't know how to perform. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I can't." The man grabbed her wrist. Tell my wife." He died before he could finish. Mara stood there, his blood on her hands, and felt something inside her crack. How many more? How many more people were going to die because of this stupid, senseless conflict? "Mara," Caleb's voice, urgent. "We need you." She turned. Another man down, this one bleeding from the head. She moved to him automatically, but her hands were shaking now and she couldn't make them stop. "Breathe," Caleb said, steadying her. "You're doing great. Just breathe." She breathed, started working again, stopped the bleeding, wrapped the wound, moved to the next. The attack lasted 3 hours. By the time the sun came up, the raiders were gone, driven off by the ranch hands' determined defense. But the cost was brutal. The new barn was gone, burned to ash. 2 men were seriously wounded, 3 more had minor injuries. And one of the attackers lay dead on Mara's kitchen table. The men stood in the yard, surveying the damage. No one spoke. What was there to say? Dutch walked over to Caleb. "We can't keep doing this." "I know. They're not going to stop. Next time they might actually kill someone." "I know. So what do we do?" Caleb looked at the body being carried out, then at the burned barn, then at Mara standing in the doorway with blood on her apron. "We end it," he said, "one way or another." That afternoon, Caleb rode into Cedar Bluff alone. Mara tried to stop him. "They'll kill you." "Maybe, but I have to try." "Try what?" "To talk, to find some way to resolve this that doesn't involve more people dying." "They're past talking." "Then I'll make them listen." She grabbed his arm. "Please don't do this." "I have to. If there's even a chance I can stop this, I have to take it." She knew that look, knew she couldn't change his mind. So she kissed him instead, hard and desperate, trying to put everything she couldn't say into it. "Come back to me," she said when they finally broke apart. "I will." He rode out, and Mara stood in the yard watching until he disappeared from sight. The wait was torture. She tried to work, tried to keep busy, but every sound made her jump. Every minute that passed felt like an hour. Dutch sat with her, rifle across his lap. "He'll be okay." "You don't know that." "No, but he's smart and he's careful. And they know killing him would bring real law down on their heads. They burned our barn twice and shot at us. They're past worrying about consequences." "Maybe. But murdering a man in broad daylight in the middle of town is different than attacking a ranch at night. One's a crime of passion, the other's just murder." She wanted to believe him, wanted to think Caleb would walk back through that door unharmed and tell her he'd fixed everything. But she'd stopped believing in easy solutions a long time ago. He came back at dusk, alone and intact. Mara ran to him, not caring about her leg or her dignity or anything except the fact that he was alive. "What happened?" she asked when she finally let him go. "I talked to the council, made them an offer." "What kind of offer?" "The kind where everyone gets to save face." He dismounted, handed the reins to Billy. "I told them we'd pay for the damage from the attacks, the stores we couldn't buy from, the lost business. Call it reparations or whatever they want. In exchange, they lift the blockade and leave us alone." "And they agreed?" "Not exactly, but they didn't say no. They want time to discuss it." Dutch frowned. "How much money are we talking?" "More than we have, but less than rebuilding would cost if they burn us out completely." "So we're paying protection money." "I prefer to think of it as buying peace." "It's the same thing." "Maybe, but if it works, it's worth it." Mara didn't like it. It felt like surrender, like letting them win. But she was also so tired of fighting, tired of being afraid, tired of treating bullet wounds in her kitchen. "What if they take the money and attack us anyway?" she asked. "Then we'll know they were never interested in peace, and we'll respond accordingly." The way he said it made her shiver, because she knew what respond accordingly meant. It meant the end of any pretense of civility. It meant war in truth, not just in practice. The town council took 3 days to respond. When they did, their answer came in the form of Turner and the deputy riding up to the ranch under a white flag. Caleb met them in the yard, Mara beside him. Behind them, the men were positioned strategically, armed but not overtly threatening. "We've considered your offer," Hendricks said. He looked uncomfortable, like a man caught between two bad choices. "The council is willing to accept, with conditions." "What conditions?" "The money you mentioned, $500, plus a public apology." "For what?" "For disrupting the peace of Cedar Bluff and bringing discord to the community." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You want me to apologize for being attacked?" "The council wants assurance that there won't be further trouble. The only trouble we've caused is existing. If that's the apology they want, they can go straight to—" Mara touched his arm. "We'll do it." Everyone turned to stare at her. "The hell we will," Caleb said. "Yes, we will. Because this isn't about pride or being right. It's about ending this before more people die." She looked at Hendricks. "We'll pay the money and make the apology. But in exchange, we wanted in writing that the blockade ends and we're left alone. No more harassment, no more attacks, no more threats. Signed by every member of the council." Hendricks nodded slowly. "That seems fair. And one more thing," Mara added. "We want Turner to apologize too. For the arson, the attack, everything. Public apology, same as ours." Turner's face went purple. "I'll do no such thing." "Then there's no deal." She met his eyes, refused to look away. "You want us to humiliate ourselves for your peace of mind? Fine. But you don't get to pretend your hands are clean." "I didn't. Everyone knows you led those attacks. Everyone knows you organized the blockade. So either you own it and apologize, or we tell the territorial marshal exactly who to arrest when he finally shows up." The bluff worked. Turner sputtered, looking to Hendricks for support, but the deputy was carefully studying the horizon. "Fine," Turner finally spat. "I'll apologize. But you make yours first." Agreed. They set it for the following Saturday. The whole thing would happen in front of the town. Apologies, payment, signed agreement. A public spectacle to satisfy everyone's need for justice or revenge or whatever they wanted to call it. That night, lying in bed, Caleb asked the question Mara had been dreading. "Are you sure about this?" "No, but I don't see another option. We could refuse, stand our ground. And how many more people die while we're standing it? How many more times do I have to dig bullets out of men who work for us? How many more bodies on my table before we admit this isn't winnable through force?" He didn't have an answer for that. "I'm tired, Caleb. I'm tired of fighting, tired of being afraid. If swallowing my pride and saying some words I don't mean gets us peace, I'll do it. I'll do worse than that if I have to." He pulled her closer. "I don't want you to have to do any of this. I know, but that's not how life works. We don't get to choose our battles. We just get to choose how we fight them." Saturday came cold and clear. They rode into Cedar Bluff in the wagon, Caleb, Mara, Dutch, and Billy. The rest of the men stayed at the ranch, on guard, in case this was an elaborate trap. The whole town was there, packed into the main street like it was a festival. Mara felt their eyes on her, judging, weighing, finding her wanting. She kept her head up anyway. The council sat on a platform that had been erected in front of the general store. Turner stood with them, looking like he'd swallowed something sour. Hendricks was there too, presumably to keep everyone honest. Caleb helped Mara down from the wagon. She took her cane, straightened her shoulders, and walked forward. The crowd parted around her, whispers following in her wake. They reached the platform. One of the council members, a thin man with spectacles, stood. "We're here to resolve the conflict between the town of Cedar Bluff and the Double Cross Ranch. Mr. Ross, you had something you wanted to say." Caleb stepped forward. He'd written out the apology the night before, words chosen carefully to satisfy the requirement without admitting actual wrongdoing. "People of Cedar Bluff," he began, voice carrying across the crowd. "I stand before you to address the discord that has arisen between my ranch and your town. It was never my intention to disrupt your community or cause distress. For any actions taken by myself or those in my employ that contributed to this situation, I offer my sincere regret." It was masterful, really. An apology that apologized for nothing, while appearing to apologize for everything. The council members looked at each other, clearly recognizing the evasion, but unable to pinpoint exactly where it lay. "Thank you, Mr. Ross," the thin man said. "And the payment?" Caleb handed over an envelope. $500 in cash, earned from months of hard work and careful saving. The thin man counted it, nodded. "This satisfies the financial portion of our agreement. Now, Mr. Turner, I believe you had something to say as well." Turner stood, face like thunder. He pulled out a piece of paper, read from it in a monotone. "I apologize for my part in the recent troubles. My actions were inappropriate, and I regret them." The words were hollow, meaningless, but they'd been said. That was what mattered. "Good," the thin man said. He produced a document, held it up. "This is the agreement signed by all council members stating that the economic blockade is lifted and the Double Cross Ranch will be allowed to conduct business in Cedar Bluff without interference. Mr. Ross, if you'll sign as well." Caleb took the pen, signed. The thin man handed him a copy. "Then this matter is concluded. We expect no further trouble from either party." It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like loss. Mara could see it in Caleb's face, the bitter knowledge that they'd been forced to pay for peace that should have been theirs by right. But they'd gotten what they came for. The blockade was over. They could buy supplies, conduct business, live their lives. As they turned to leave, a voice called out from the crowd. "Wait!" A woman stepped forward, older, maybe 60, with iron gray hair and eyes like chips of flint. Mara recognized her from the general store. Mrs. Hewitt, the shopkeeper who'd started all this. "I have something to say," Mrs. Hewitt announced. The crowd quieted. On the platform, the council members looked nervous. "This whole situation has been a disgrace," she continued, "not because of Mr. Ross or his wife, but because of us. Because we let fear and prejudice turn us into bullies and criminals." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Turner stood, face apoplectic. "Now wait just a minute. Sit down, Thomas. I am speaking." She turned back to Mara. "Mrs. Ross, I owe you an apology. A real one. I treated you abominably because you didn't fit my idea of what a proper woman should look like. I made assumptions about your character based on your disability and your circumstances, and I was wrong." Mara couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was hearing. "I've thought a lot about this over the past weeks," Mrs. Hewitt continued. "Thought about what kind of person I've become, what kind of town we've become, and I don't like the answer. We're supposed to be a community, but we've acted like a mob. And I'm ashamed." She stepped closer to the platform, looked up at the council. "I'm reopening my store to the Double Cross Ranch. No restrictions, no conditions. And I'd encourage every other merchant here to do the same. Not because they're paying us or because they apologized, but because it's the right thing to do." Another woman stepped forward. Then another. Then a man from the crowd. "I'll sell to them," the man said. He owned the feed store, Mara remembered. "So will I," said another. Within minutes, nearly half the merchants in town had pledged to end the blockade, council agreement or not. The council members looked furious, but there was nothing they could do. They'd gotten their apology and their money. They couldn't force people to maintain a boycott. Turner was nearly vibrating with rage. This is ridiculous. You're all going to regret this.
No, no, Thomas, Mrs. Hewitt said calmly. The only thing I regret is not standing up to you sooner. You're a bully and a coward, and I'm done listening to you. She turned back to Mara. I hope you can forgive us. I know we don't deserve it. Mara found her voice. Thank you. Thank you. It wasn't eloquent, but it was all she had.
They left town in a daze, the copy of the agreement in Caleb's pocket feeling almost irrelevant now. On the ride back, none of them spoke, too overwhelmed to find words. Back at the ranch, the men were waiting. When Caleb told them what had happened, disbelief spread across every face.
They just changed their minds? Billy asked. Some of them did, enough of them. What about Turner? He's still a problem, but he's one man now, not a whole town backing him up.
Dutch shook his head. I'll be damned. Didn't think that was possible.
Neither did I, Caleb admitted.
That night, Mara and Caleb sat on the porch, watching the stars come out. She was exhausted down to her bones, but it was a good exhaustion, the kind that came from winning a battle you thought was unwinnable.
You were incredible today, Caleb said. I didn't do anything. You stood up there in front of everyone who's tried to destroy you, and you didn't flinch. That's something. I was terrified. I know. But you didn't show it. She leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of him beside her. Do you think it's really over? With Turner? Probably not. But with the town? Yeah, I think it might be. And if Turner tries something else? Then we deal with it. Together. The word settled over her like a blanket. Together. Not alone. Not fighting by herself against impossible odds. Together.
A week later, word came that the territorial marshal was finally en route, responding to their letter. By the time he arrived, though, the crisis had already passed. He took statements, looked at the evidence of the attacks, and arrested Turner for arson and assault. The trial happened 2 months later in Cheyenne. Turner was found guilty and sentenced to 5 years in prison. The other men who'd participated in the attacks got lighter sentences or fines, depending on their level of involvement. Cedar Bluff, stripped of its ringleader, settled into an uneasy peace with the Double Cross Ranch. Not everyone was friendly. There were still people who crossed the street to avoid Mara, who wouldn't meet her eyes in the store. But the hostility had lost its teeth. They were just people now, not monsters. Spring turned to summer. The ranch rebuilt. The deliveries to the mining camp continued, supplemented now by regular sales in town. Money was still tight, but they were surviving. More than surviving. Billy's leg healed as well as it was going to. He'd always walk with a limp, always need the crutch on bad days. But he was alive and working, and that was enough. One evening in late June, Mara was in the garden, a much larger garden than before, part of the push towards self-sufficiency, when she heard a wagon approaching. She looked up to see a woman climbing down, moving slowly, carefully. One arm was in a sling. Mara set down her tools and walked over. "Can I help you?" The woman looked up, and Mara saw the bruises fading on her face, the split lip that was healing. "Are you Mara Ross?" "I am. I heard you were hiring, that you might have work." "What kind of work are you looking for?" "Anything. Cooking, cleaning, whatever you need. I can work hard, I promise. She stopped, voice breaking. "I just need to get away from my husband before he kills me." Mara looked at this woman, broken but not defeated, scared but still fighting, and saw herself 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Every version of herself that had ever needed help and been turned away. "What's your name?" "Sarah." "Sarah, I can't promise you anything permanent, but I can promise you a safe place to sleep and 3 meals a day while you figure out what comes next. Does that work?" Sarah's face crumpled. "Yes, thank you. Thank you so much." Mara helped her down, led her to the house. Caleb met them at the door, took one look at Sarah and understood. "We'll set up a room for her," he said quietly to Mara. "In the main house?" "Where else? She needs to feel safe." That night, after Sarah had been fed and settled in a spare room, Caleb asked Mara what she was thinking. "I'm thinking we have space, we have resources, and there are probably more women like her, stuck in impossible situations with nowhere to go. You want to help them? I want to give them what I was given, a chance." He smiled. "Then let's do it." Over the next year, 3 more women came to the Double Cross Ranch. One was fleeing an abusive father. Another had been widowed with no money and no prospects. The third was like Mara, disabled and deemed unemployable by everyone else. They worked, they healed, they built new lives. Some stayed, becoming permanent parts of the ranch community. Others moved on when they were ready, taking with them the knowledge that they were stronger than their circumstances. The ranch grew, not just in size or wealth, but in purpose. It became known as a place where people who didn't fit anywhere else could find belonging, where strength was measured in resilience, not muscles, where you were judged by your actions, not your appearance. Cedar Bluff slowly changed too. Mrs. Hewitt became an unlikely ally, using her influence to shift opinion in the town. It didn't happen overnight. Prejudice never dies that easily. But it happened. Slowly, grudgingly, the town learned to see Mara and the women like her as people instead of problems. 2 years after that first terrible winter, Mara stood in the rebuilt barn, watching Caleb work with a new horse. Her legs still ached on cold days. She still needed the cane more often than not. But she'd stopped seeing those things as failures. They were just part of who she was. The same way the scar on Caleb's face was part of him, or Billy's limp was part of him. Evidence of survival, not weakness. Caleb finished with the horse and walked over. "What are you thinking about?"
How strange life is. 2 years ago, I thought I was coming here to hide, to find some forgotten corner where I could exist without being noticed. And instead I found a home, a family, a purpose. She looked up at him. "I found you." He kissed her, soft and certain. "Best day of my life, when you climbed down from that wagon. Even with everything that came after? Especially with everything that came after. We built something here, Mara. Something real."
She thought about that, about the women in the house, learning to trust again, about the men who'd chosen loyalty over safety, about a town that had been forced to confront its own ugliness and, slowly, chosen to be better. "Yeah," she said, "we did." That evening, they gathered for dinner, all of them, ranch hands and refugees and everyone in between. The table was crowded, loud with conversation and laughter. Sarah was teaching one of the cowboys to read. Billy was arguing with Dutch about the best way to break a horse. The newest arrival, a girl of maybe 16 who'd run away from a brothel in Denver, sat quietly absorbing it all. Mara stood at the stove, dishing up food, and felt something she'd never expected to feel again. Contentment. Not happiness exactly. Life was still hard, still uncertain. But contentment in the knowledge that this, right here, was enough. Caleb appeared beside her, took the spoon from her hand. "Sit. Let someone else serve for once." "I don't mind." "I know. But you don't have to do everything yourself anymore." She let him guide her to a chair, let him bring her food, let herself be cared for. Around her, the family they'd built continued their conversations, their arguments, their laughter. After dinner, Caleb stood, glass in hand. "I want to make a toast." The room quieted. 2 years ago, this ranch was just a business, a way to make money and survive. But somewhere along the way, it became something more. It became a home. And that's because of the people in this room. Each of you has brought something irreplaceable: strength, courage, loyalty, hope. You've taken a broken place and made it whole. He looked at Mara. "Especially you. You came here when you had nothing left to lose, and you gave us everything. You showed us that the things people call weaknesses are often just different kinds of strength, that the people society throws away are often the ones worth keeping, that home isn't a place, it's the people who refuse to leave." Mara felt tears burning behind her eyes. "So here's to all of us," Caleb continued, raising his glass higher. "To the misfits and the outcasts, the broken and the brave. To proving that you don't have to be perfect to be worthy. To building something that lasts." "To building something that lasts," everyone echoed, glasses raised. They drank, and the conversation resumed, and Mara sat in the middle of it all, feeling like she'd finally found the thing she'd been searching for her whole life. Later, much later, after everyone had gone to bed, she stood at the bedroom window, looking out at the ranch. The barn stood solid against the night sky. The bunkhouse glowed with lamplight. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed peacefully. Caleb came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "The first night I was here." how terrified I was, how certain I was that I'd fail. And now I know that failure isn't falling down. It's staying down. And I'm done staying down. He tightened his arms around her. I love you. I love you too. They stood like that for a long time, watching their home sleep, thinking about everything they'd overcome and everything still to come. The future was uncertain. It always was. The town might turn on them again. The ranch might fail. Life might throw them challenges they couldn't handle. But they'd face it together. That was the difference. Not strength or resources or luck, but the simple, stubborn refusal to face the darkness alone. And maybe that was the lesson in all of this. That belonging wasn't something you were granted by others or earned through perfection. It was something you built, piece by piece, with people who chose to see you as you were and decided you were enough. Mara had spent most of her life believing she had to prove her worth, had to justify her existence through constant achievement and self-sacrifice. But the Double Cross Ranch had taught her something different. Worth wasn't conditional. It wasn't something you could lose if you failed or couldn't keep up or needed help. It was inherent, permanent, yours by virtue of being human. And once you understood that, really understood it, everything changed. You stopped apologizing for taking up space, stopped shrinking yourself to make others comfortable, stopped measuring your value by other people's standards. You just lived, messy and imperfect and real. You built a life that meant something, not because it was extraordinary, but because it was yours. That was what the women who came to the ranch learned, one by one, that they didn't have to be victims or heroes. They could just be people, building ordinary lives in extraordinary circumstances, finding strength not in spite of their scars, but because of them. The ranch became known for that, not just in Cedar Bluff, but beyond. Women started arriving from farther away, from Denver, from Cheyenne, from places Mara had never heard of. They came scared and broken and desperate, and they left whole. Not healed completely, some wounds never fully healed, but whole enough to face whatever came next. And some of them stayed, built their own homes on the edges of the ranch property, started their own businesses in town, created a network of women who looked out for each other, who refused to let anyone fall through the cracks. 5 years after that first terrible winter, Cedar Bluff had changed. Not completely. There were still people who clung to their prejudices, who saw Mara and her refuge as a threat. But they were the minority now. Most people had learned slowly and sometimes grudgingly that difference wasn't dangerous, that making room for people who didn't fit the mold made the community stronger, not weaker. Mara stood in the town square one afternoon, watching a new arrival step down from the stage. The woman was young, maybe 20, with burn scars covering half her face and one arm ending at the elbow. Mrs. Hewitt appeared beside Mara. Another one? Looks like it. You've got a gift for finding them. Or maybe they've got a gift for finding you. Mara smiled. Maybe we find each other. She walked over to the young woman who was looking around nervously. Are you looking for someone? Mara asked. I'm looking for the Double Cross Ranch. I heard they help people like me. They do. I'm Mara Ross. I run the place with my husband. The young woman's eyes widened. You're Mara Ross? I've heard stories about you, about how you saved a man's life and fought off a whole town and built a place where broken people could be whole. Mara almost laughed. The stories had gotten exaggerated over time, as stories did, but the core was true enough. Come on, she said, gesturing to her wagon. Let's get you home. Home. That word still felt strange sometimes, even after all these years, but it fit. The Double Cross Ranch was home, not just for her, but for everyone who needed one. As they rode out of town, the young woman asked questions about the ranch, about the work, about what would be expected of her. Honestly, Mara said, we'll expect you to try, to show up, to be part of the community. Beyond that, we'll figure it out together. Everyone heals at their own pace in their own way. We don't rush that. And if I can't work, if I'm not useful, you're useful by existing, by being here, by choosing to keep going even when it's hard. That's enough. The young woman started crying. Mara let her, understanding that sometimes tears were the first step toward healing. At the ranch, Caleb was waiting. He'd gotten grayer over the years, the lines around his eyes deeper. but he was still strong, still steady, still the man who'd looked at her on that first day and seen someone worth taking a chance on. "New arrival?" he asked. "Her name's Emma. She's staying." "Good." He helped Emma down from the wagon, his touch gentle. "Welcome to the Double Cross Ranch. You need anything, you ask. Someone here will help." Emma nodded, overwhelmed. Sarah appeared, still at the ranch after all these years, now managing the household, and took Emma inside to get settled. Mara and Caleb stood alone in the yard. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "What?" "All of this. Taking me in, fighting the town, turning the ranch into a refuge. It would have been easier to just run cattle." He considered the question seriously. "No, it wouldn't have been easier. It would have been emptier. This," he gestured at the house, at the land, at everything they'd built. "This matters. We're not just surviving anymore. We're making a difference. A small difference. Every difference starts small." She knew he was right. They couldn't save everyone, couldn't solve every problem, but they could help the people who came to them, could offer them a chance, a choice, a place to start over. And maybe that was enough. Maybe you didn't have to change the whole world. Maybe changing a few lives was just as important. That night, lying in bed, Mara thought about the long road that had brought her here, the deaths and losses, the pain and humiliation, the endless struggle to prove she deserved to exist. She'd thought survival meant enduring alone, had believed that asking for help was weakness, that needing people made you vulnerable. But she'd been wrong. Survival wasn't about isolation. It was about connection, about finding people who saw your scars and chose to stay anyway, about building something together that none of you could build alone. That was what the Double Cross Ranch was. Not a refuge in the sense of hiding from the world, but a fortress built by people who refused to give up on each other, who understood that strength came in many forms, not just physical power, but emotional resilience, stubborn hope, the courage to keep trying. And that was the real lesson. Not that you had to be perfect or strong or extraordinary, but that you had to keep showing up, keep trying, keep believing that tomorrow might be better than today. Sometimes it was. Sometimes it wasn't. But either way, you weren't facing it alone. That made all the difference. Mara closed her eyes, Caleb's breathing steady beside her, and let herself rest. Really rest, in a way she hadn't been able to for most of her life. Because she was home. Not just in the physical sense, but in every way that mattered. She belonged here. Not because she'd earned it or proven herself worthy, but because she'd chosen it and been chosen in return. And that finally was enough.